The Planet Sport Rugby Podcast.
Hello, Lynn Flint here, and this is the Planet Sport Rugby Podcast, where it's all about African rugby as we get to know the faces behind the continent's fastest growing sport. Now, joining me on today's podcast is a man doing great things for Zambian rugby. I'm talking about Tom Chaloba, a former rugby international, now working with the Zambia Rugby Union and founder of the Die Hard Rugby Foundation. Tom, thank you for your time. This should be really interesting. Really excited about this. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be part of your podcast.
We're taking a real look at your playing days, moving through into your coaching, what your ambitions are for Zambian rugby, all centred around the initiatives I know you care a lot about. So thank you so much for your time. I think the first thing to say, Tom, is you seem like a very busy man at spinning lots of different plates. Just based on what you say on Twitter, actually alone, you say you're a rugby advocate, a manager, a coach, an activist, a pioneer. The list goes on. Just give us an insight into what a typical week looks like for you with all of your rugby commitments that you've got going on.
Thank you very much once again for having me on your podcast. I should mention that I've been following your podcast. It's quite interactive, quite educative, quite informative. And it's really my pleasure to be part of your team today.
Thank you.
Well, like you've rightly pointed out, usually my typical week is very busy, if you will, in the sense that I have to juggle between a number of responsibilities. But the goodness is most of them are under the same umbrella. Maybe in the morning, I have to make sure that I take care of the communications on behalf of the union, where I'm a communications manager. I also run the social media for the union. Then later in the afternoons, I have to take care of my volunteer coaches at the Die Hard Rugby Academy, and obviously my day is summed up with writing reports, taken from different locations, both on behalf of the Zambia Rugby Union and also on behalf of Get Into Rugby. So it's not your typical week, but it keeps me busy, it keeps me occupied, and when you look at it, generally, it's all about having fun because I enjoy doing everything for rugby.
Tom, you're clearly rugby mad and absolutely love the sport. The first question there is, where did that passion come from? Why do you love rugby so much?
I've been asked that question a number of times. Usually, the first answer that comes to mind is, I don't know. Because I actually came into the sport accidentally. So I came to Kawe about 19 years ago. And on the second day, I was going to the hospital, and then behind a fence, I heard people making a lot of noise. Hey, hey, hey. So I drove in, and then I saw people running around, bare-chested, diving in mud and stuff like that. It was actually in the rain season, so there was a lot of mud, there was a lot of dirt all over. So I went and sat and started watching them. Then when they had finished their practice, one of the coaches came over and said, "Hey, I've been seeing you seated there for some time. Would you mind joining us later for trainings?" I was like, I've never really known what this game is all about. Then he said, "Yeah, don't worry. That's why I'm here." Late in the afternoons, around 6, I found myself, coming with my small kit bag and joining the team. And ever since, I've not looked back.
But I suppose as a player, you reached some great heights, didn't you? You managed to captain Zambia, played for lots of years for the Zambia national team, played against some top nations, some top players. You must have some very fond memories of those playing days.
Indeed, I do. And of particular interest, obviously, is the very first time that I played against the Fiji Sevens national team. So there was a tournament which was held in Namibia. Should have been the Trustco Sevens in 2007 or 2008, thereabout. Wow, having watched Fiji all along and all of a sudden having to face them one-on-one.
Yeah,
it was quite an encounter. Unfortunately for me, I was captain of the Sevens national team then, and it was quite
an education.
It was quite yeah. They beat us, I think 45-5. We scored a try under the post, lucky for us. But yeah, it was quite something to cherish, because having been an admirer of the Fiji Sevens, and all of a sudden having to tell my players, hey boys, we can do this. Hey boys, let's do this. Heads up, boys. And it was quite something. And having played against the Springboks, the Blissboks, on a number of occasions was also quite something. Because I remember there was one time when we camped in Johannesburg for about a month, and we played in a number of local tournaments there. Luckily for us, the Springbok Sevens were also taking part in those same tournaments. So we would move from location to location, rubbing shoulders with the finest, the very best team in Africa. And, we made quite good memories with the likes of Ryan Benjamin, and also the current coach of the Sevens, South Africa Sevens. I had actually made it my point that if at all he was to come my way, he would not pass through. There were a number of occasions when he would bump me aside and just run to the try line and score. But yeah, those were quite some fond memories that I really cherish and look back on now and again.
So who were some of those best players? I know you've just mentioned a couple there. Who you came up against? Was there one or two that you think this is a real privilege to be on the same pitch, or you had a great rivalry with when you were playing?
I wouldn't call it rivalry, but because it wasn't like I told them off. But Ryan Benjamin was quite someone to look out for. He had a terrible sidestep. So he would come charging at you, and then he would just make a sidestep which would leave you seated
on the floor. Yeah.
So I always tried to look out for that, but it caught me off guard now and again. So that was really something that I cherished, because every time I knew that we were playing against them, I would really try to work on my defensive moves. But once or twice he would always catch me off guard.
Sounds like you spent a lot of your time as a team defending. It doesn't sound like you did much attacking, Tom, with Zambia. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think when you look back at how it was, I think we really spent a lot of time defending against these guys, because they had mastered the art of sevens, and we were obviously an upcoming sevens team. As much as possible, we worked on our defense so as to somehow narrow the point gap.
Well, you've got to start with the defense, haven't you? You've got to have a solid base, then go forward. So it's not all bad. It's just not great if you can never actually get over the halfway line, is it?
Oh, thank you, Liam. Yeah,
I'm sure it was good fun at the time. So tell us why you made that switch from playing to then coaching when that time came, because lots of people, when they reach the end of their playing days, they want to get away from the game, do other interests, have other passions. Why did you say to yourself that you wanted to remain in the game? What was it?
Well, my exit from the game was, to a large extent, not voluntary. Because I remember I was about 26, 27. There was a tournament that we were taking part in, a local sevens tournament back here in Zambia. The Sevens national team, of which I was captain back then, had just come back from the Harare Sevens. Then on a Saturday, we took part in a local Sevens tournament back here in Zambia as well, playing in the finals against Diggers Rugby Club. The game was very tight, such that second half we were 0-0, 0-0. Obviously, for a game of that magnitude, there was supposed to be a winner. At some point, I started doing a counter-attack about a minute or so before the end of the game. And we were really, really, looking forward to lifting that trophy. I took it personal, if you will.
Yeah.
Got the ball and then just started ramming and, bashing everyone across the pitch. But unfortunately, I think I got too excited or what. Then a defender just came and gave me a tap tackle. And I was really flying. I tripped, came crashing down. So I stretched my hand trying to like absorb the impact, but unfortunately I think I was too heavy, too fast to stop that impact. So that's how I broke my left arm, both the radius and ulnar, and I had a concussion.
Oh wow! Just
So
to
I
make
was
it
quickly
worse.
rushed to, in my unconscious state, I was rushed to the hospital. Still brings back bad memories, but yeah, that's how I was out of the game. The doctor told me, this is too bad. You cannot go back to practice. I realized that my playing career was no more.
Yeah, so tell us about Die Hard Rugby. What powered you to do that? Why did you want to start that? And then also, what are the aims? What's the ultimate ambition for that academy?
Yeah, so back here in Zambia, around that time, youth rugby was almost non-existent. And I say almost because there were maybe one or two clubs, two teams that had, developmental sides. But apart from that, there was literally nothing.
Right.
When I volunteered at a local orphanage, I had the aim, I had the idea of trying to groom them into rugby players so that eventually they can come and join my club. That was Green Eagles. So, as I said earlier, luckily for me, they were for the idea, and they let me have the kids on a Tuesday and on a Thursday. So in those two sessions, I made sure that I showed the kids, or at least I taught them what they needed to know. I also started asking a few of my colleagues that I used to play with to accompany me so that they could give demonstrations. Yeah, we have quite a number of volunteers across the country who, after seeing some of our activities, they also say, "Hey, can we open a franchise of Die Hard Rugby in this place or in this location?" And we've been more than willing to spread our tentacles across the country. So the main aim was basically to increase the number of participants in the game, because previously most of the people that would start playing the game would join in their early 20s or maybe in their mid 20s.
Well, I'm sure as an aim, you'd agree you're absolutely smashing it. Do you know how many children and youth you are impacting? Do you have figures as to the impact that you're having?
Yeah, from last count, last December, we had actually impacted the lives of 3,747
very precise
kids. Yeah. Luckily for me, I have I have my piece of paper here. So the age range from ages 6 to 19. So that's how we've shaped our programs, and that's how many kids we've managed to impact.
That's brilliant. And I think even from outside of Zambia, across the continent, and even over here in Europe as well, you can see that rugby is taking off, it's exploding in Zambia very specifically. As a guy on the inside, you're right at the forefront of that. Do you know what's behind this increase in people loving rugby? Is it just Tom Chaloba and his mission? Is it all down to you? Or is there something bigger going on? What's capturing Zambians' hearts for rugby?
The fact that we've managed to remove the myth that rugby is a dangerous and dirty game.
Right.
Because growing up, when you hear someone talking about rugby, you would already, from first impressions, you would have that impression of a game where people stamp on each other, where they spit on each other, where they break bones and stuff like that. So we've and I'm emphasizing on the we. We've been working hard to break down that myth. So we've been rolling out on some programs where we go out into schools and give them a few demonstrations. And at the forefront of it all, obviously, we've been pioneering the tag game. So we are emphasizing, especially for newcomers, we are emphasizing and promoting the game of tag rugby, because obviously there's minimal or literally no contact in that game. So that has been at the forefront of the rise and the growth of the game in Zambia. And I think to a large extent we've been making good use of the available media to showcase what we've been doing in the past few years. And this is not to say the people who were there before me were not doing much, but I think in the last few years, social media has been a very useful tool, to disseminate and transmit information across countries and across continents and globally as a whole.
Well, if people are worried about the physical aspects of the game in Zambia, you'll have to start telling people that you didn't break your arm and have a career-ending injury through rugby. You'll have to say you're in an accident or something.
You know what? There was a point actually when someone, a former player, I think as well, told me on social media, because there was one time that I actually posted my photo and then I was trying to tell my story. So he came in my inbox and said, "Hey, watch out what you're doing, because you are pioneering this movement and you are also trying to bring it down. So tone down on personalities or talking about yourself and just put the game at the forefront." And that has been about 4 years now, and I've never spoken about about my career-ending injury since
Keep it quiet.
Yeah, and I think it has really come in handy. Yeah, it has really helped with the growth of the game.
Well, you can get injured in any sport, can't you? And everyone in Zambia loves soccer, but you can get injured easily playing that and break your legs. So it's not like rugby's on its own, is it? It's just life. That's what happens.
True. And to a large extent, again, the other reason why we've been so passionate with my team and everyone else, even with the union, is the fact that we've been telling the young people and the nation as a whole that obviously majority Zambians love soccer, love football, but it's not everyone who's going to get a place, in the Zambia football national team or even in the local football teams. So we are pushing the agenda of having rugby as an alternative. So it's luckily for us, it's been resonating very well with our listeners and our followers, and the numbers are speaking for themselves.
For sure, yeah, they definitely are. And how excited are you, Tom, right now about the future of the national team? I know you're working alongside them, so you're seeing the players and you're seeing the progress. How excited are you for the next 5-10 years of Zambian rugby?
These are really exciting times for us as rugby administrators in Zambia. Obviously, like you've rightly pointed out, we've seen some good progress in the last few years, and to be specific, last year. So our sevens national team is currently 5th in Africa, which is not an easy feat to achieve.
No.
And obviously our 15th national team has also been making good progress. And luckily for us, obviously, is the fact that we've been upgraded to the Gold Cup of Africa. So we'll be playing amongst the top 8 nations in Africa. Yeah. So we've really come too far for us to give up now. So we are really excited with the progress that we've been making in the last few years, and looking forward. I think the future looks brighter. Things can only get better, and I'm saying this not out of naivety, but it's because of the progress that we've been making. Obviously, behind the scenes, we've launched a varsity cup We've also launched a collegiate competition, which should be kicking off mid March, and we also have a schools tournament. So we've been working very hard behind the scenes to ensure that there is continuity. So we are really excited for the future, and we're looking forward to having more success.
Yeah, I can tell that you're very excited. I can feel that coming through already. You're a die-hard Zambian fan. Do you think they can become
Tell me about it.
a powerhouse, not just in Africa, but in the world game as well? Obviously, you've got to start at home and conquer the continent. Do you think Zambia can reach that in your coaching lifetime in the next few years? Is that realistic?
Well, I don't want to be a pessimist, but I think if we continue growing at the rate at which we are, I think we may not maybe necessarily be a powerhouse in the world, but I think we may continue being a powerhouse in Africa. Obviously, it would be too much of an ask for us to be a powerhouse in the world currently, or maybe not in the next 2 years.
Well, I was just going to ask you, I know for now there's a huge gap between, obviously South Africa are always at the top, Namibia even are quite high as well, and then the rest of the continent are all chasing. Do you think more needs to be done to provide fans of rugby with a more competitive Africa altogether? Or is this just life? This is resources and infrastructure, and it's okay how it is at the minute. How do you see things?
Obviously, South Africa has been at the forefront of rugby in Africa as a whole. But yeah, I think more still needs to be done to bridge that gap. It will not do good for South Africa to be 100 steps ahead of everyone else. It will not be very good for competition. Though obviously, like you probably know, the Springboks do not compete in any African competition except the 7th team. But the 15th team do not compete in any African competition at the moment because obviously their level of play is just way beyond what any African nation would compete against. But I think more still needs to be done, obviously by South Africa Rugby Union, Rugby Africa itself, and also World Rugby. It may not necessarily be a matter of pumping in more funds, but I think helping out with infrastructure here and there, helping out with equipment here and there will really help bridge that gap. If we are to see a lot of African nations, competing at that high level, and more still needs to be done to bridge that gap. We expect obviously the bodies like World Rugby, Africa Rugby to come on board and help us. I think us as administrators in these various unions also need to step up obviously our efforts to brand our game so as to attract corporate entities to come in and help us out in some way or another. So I think it is a double-edged sword.
Very true. Yeah, there's lots of work to be done for sure. Tom, it'd be great to get your opinion on this show. We like to also inform listeners as well as just you and I chat and hopefully not send people to sleep. We like to just talk about a few things that are currently in world rugby news at the minute. It'd be great to get your opinion, especially on my first topic because it's very relevant for you. Just on the theme of injuries in rugby. I'm sure you've seen a lot of international players recently have had to retire, some quite high profile players. Pat Lambie of the Springboks recently, just because of concussion, persistent injury. So I just wanted to ask you, there's been lots of debate. Do we need to change rugby laws, change the way we coach, which obviously is a big area for you of concern? Do you think injuries just happen and everyone needs to calm down, realise that this is contact rugby? Or do you agree, when you're especially dealing with tag rugby and children, that we need to change the way we are coaching and teaching people about rugby? What do you think? It's a tough question. I deliberately asked you.
I've been following that debate, and it's been raising quite a number of eyebrows across the globe. A few twitches needs to be done, needs to be made in the game, in how the game is being regulated, and also coaches also need to make a few twitches in the approach in which they want their players to play the game. But I think if I was just to give a definite answer, I would say the game needs to be left the way it is, because obviously it is a contact sport, and some of those injuries are obviously imminent, because when two people bash into each other. But again, on the other hand, I think we also need to make a few twitches, like the one where they've like penalized, bring a huge penalty on the aspect of high tackles. I think that is very progressive, and it's really good for the game. But I think if we were to make major changes, it would really dilute the game the way we know it now.
And just out of interest, talking about Die Hard Rugby when you're coaching, at what age do you transition the boys and girls you're teaching from tag rugby to contact? Is there a definite point or age for you?
Yes. So they play tag and touch from 6 up to 14. Then from 14, that's when we gradually introduce them into the contact aspect of the game.
Right. Okay.
And obviously, even then, we are very, 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 very careful to not allow, the heaviest and biggest contact.
Sure.
So when we are transitioning the young boys and girls, we make sure that we bring in an experienced referee who will be on the lookout for any dangerous play, because we know that obviously these are young boys and girls who come from different families with different opinions on the game. We avoid injuries as much as possible so that the parents can allow their kids to come in the next day. We know that we've got the whole country, or at least the whole community, looking and watching and waiting for anything, for any reason as to why they should stop their children from taking part in the game. And we are not in a hurry to give them any reason to withdraw their children from practicing.
Yeah, it's going to be a topic that rolls on for a long time, I'm sure. I just thought as a coach, it'd be fascinating to get your take and put you on the spot. So I well and truly put you on the spot there. You did well. I'm sure people will be pleased.
Yeah, you did.
That's the beauty of this. You can't let people down. Down. So I know you had to be honest.
You've really put me on the spot. And I hope none of your listeners will quote me for this.
Yeah, there'll be lots of articles written. There'll be lots of people inboxing it. Yeah. For our second topic, it'd be great just to touch on the World Cup. I would love to know what you think of the chances of the African representatives. So South Africa, Namibia. How do you see them performing in Japan against the likes of the All Blacks, Australia's, the Englands, the Irelands?
I've got high hopes for South Africa, keeping our fingers crossed that this time around they will reach at least maybe even the quarterfinal stages or the semi-final stages. To be good for our game as well.
Of course, yeah. Anything can happen, can't it, at a World Cup? So Namibia could spring some surprises too. They're in the same group as South Africa. That's not what you want, really. You'd like them to go separate paths, but I'm sure that'll go a long way. But that's just how it is. I
actually enjoyed the way Namibia played against New Zealand in the last World Cup. I think if you remember very well, they were actually given a standing ovation at the after the final whistle. Yes. It shows that they've really been improving in their game, and hoping that this time around they'll take it a notch up.
Exactly. We shall see. Well, Tom, it's great to get your insight and hear more about all the amazing work you're doing across Zambia. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much, Liam. And it's been my pleasure. I say, continue doing, all the hard work, putting, African rugby on the map and showcasing, the works that we are doing to grow the game in the continent and in our various countries. And thanks again to all your loyal listeners for joining us. And obviously, I'm hoping that they've learned a thing or two about some of the strides that are being put, to grow the game in Africa.
The Planet Sport Rugby Podcast.
Okay, that's us for this week's podcast. A massive thanks again to Tom Chaloba. Do keep up to date with what we're doing all across social media. We're talking Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at PS Rugby Podcast. We'd also love for you to join our WhatsApp community, and this means you can keep up to date with upcoming episodes. Even more importantly, though, you can send in your questions for our rugby guests to answer on the podcast. So all you have to do is drop us a WhatsApp message, and the number is +44 7707 776 790. So give us a message on WhatsApp with your name and where you are in the world, and we will put you onto our database. Do join us for the next podcast, where again we'll be getting to know one of Africa's best in the world of rugby. If you would like to listen to this again, anything we've spoken about with Tom, just head over to iTunes or Spotify, or you can go straight to our website, which is planetsport.tv. And there you'll also find our two other shows, Planet Sport, which is for the all-round sports fan, and Planet Sport Football Africa. So please do go check them out. But until next time, I'm Lynn Flynn, and you've been listening to the Planet Sport Rugby Podcast, which is a Passion for Sport production.